Computer's praise. There we go. We're recording now. So I'll just start again. Everyone pause. Welcome to the Sitecore New Zealand user group. We're really fortunate. I'm really fortunate to work with them. We've had we started about January this year doing serious Docker investigations on how Docker worked and how it could benefit our business and how it could make development so much less painful. And it's been an absolute revelation. The first couple of weeks trying to learn about it and making huge mistakes and scratching my head going, why is it doing that? I don't understand this. Eventually gave way to the dawning realization that it was an absolute fabulous thing. And Cameron's has really run with it. And I think he's got a little surprise to share with the community worldwide during his presentation, something I think you're just going to go, oh, I got to have that. It's exactly what I wanted when I went looking for Docker stuff. And so he's written almost a definitive guide, which I wish I'd had back then, but then chicken and egg, right? We had to go and investigate it first. So without further ado, drum rolls, you know, lightning bolts, that sort of thing, I'd really like to welcome the most fabulous gent from Canada, Kamru's Jamin. Take it away, buddy.
Hey, thanks, Bruce. Let's share my screen. Ready to roll?
Yep.
Okay. Hey everyone. Thanks everyone for joining. So yeah, nice. Bruce gave me a nice little welcome there. As he mentioned, we're going to be going through Sitecore and Docker and try and just give you a few practical tips that really would have helped us when we were starting, trying to figure out what this thing is and what all these buzzwords are that people keep going on about. So as Bruce mentioned, my name is Kamru's Jamin. I'm a partner over at Conabus. We mainly operate out of North America, but Bruce is our head of operations over in the APAC region. So trying to grow. I've been doing Sitecore for over 10 years now, and the Sitecore MVP for 8 years. So hopefully some of you guys have read some of my stuff in the past. So a quick overview of the stuff we're going to be going over. We're going to be looking at what the problem is we're trying to solve, what is Docker very quickly, how to get started with Docker, how to use Sitecore and Docker together, because that's what we're here for at the end of the day. Some quick overview on some of the tooling and debugging, because that was one of the biggest questions I had when we were starting is how do we do those normal things that we usually do? And I'll run through a couple of gotchas along the way, which stumped us as we were trying to set this thing up. So I think the biggest question that everybody has is what is Docker, right? Why? What's the thing that we're trying to solve here? And usually the problem in a development environment is developer setup, right? So we get a new person starting on a project, we bring team members on and off the project, or we got somebody who has an issue with their machine and needs to set it back up again because you know things go wrong, right? Also front-end developers, we tend to keep front-end developers away from Sitecore because it's a bit of a pain to set up. So they tend to work in a separate static repo, and then we'll hand it over to the front-end developers who will then reintegrate some of their work. So we need an easier way of setting up Sitecore for them as well. Repeatable deployments into clean environments. Generally, when we're working locally, we'll set up Sitecore once on our local machine, and then we just keep deploying into that same environment. And at best, we would take a backup of the root web folder when we start, and then we would just maybe once in a while do a delete and a clean, or maybe just clean out the DLL folders and app config include folders at best. But we're not usually doing a clean deployment on our local machine. And the other thing, of course, upgrades and updates. So if you're going from Sitecore 9.2 to 9.3, you've got to go through an entire upgrade process for every single team member on your team. Or if you want to add some sort of update, whether that's a hotfix from Sitecore or maybe you're adding an additional module, something like SPE, SXA, Coveo, whatever. You have to go through and do that on every single developer's machine. So it's a time-consuming. It can become a time-consuming problem. And Sitecore itself has grown over the years, from a single IIS instance and 3 little databases to a whole host of different services and microservices. And even for a veteran like me, it's a lot, right? It's kind of hard to keep up with all the little services, all the little configurations that need to happen. If something on the machine goes wrong, it's quite difficult to debug and figure out exactly what it is that's gone wrong. Sometimes it's just easier to start again, right? So what is Docker? So we've probably, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because there have been some presentations on, more detailed presentations on what Docker is and what it does in the background, but we've probably all used something like Docker in the past, right? We've hopefully a lot of you have worked with virtual machines in the past, whether that's locally or in sort of deployed environments. And what you're trying to do there is create some sort of environment, a containered environment, and have an operating system with IIS and SQL Server and whatever else installed. Certainly at a lot of agencies we worked at previously, they would use virtual machines per client or per project. So you would spin up your virtual machine, work in that virtual machine, and then spin it back down once you're done, and then move on to the next one and keep switching between that. Virtual machine is trying to virtualize hardware. So you still have a virtual machine with another machine with an entire operating system in. Containers are trying to virtualize the software. So you're trying to not replicate the host operating system. You're just trying to have these micro little containers that sit on top of your existing system and then just run these little services as they need, sharing resources with the original host operating system. Probably a good way of thinking about it is virtual machines in Azure versus PaaS. Right? PaaS has all these little containers without these heavier operating systems within. Docker itself, it also builds up in layers. So you can build an XP layer, and then within that, on top of that, you would build up an SPE layer, and on top of that, you could build up another SXA layer. Sitecore Docker layer in itself sits on top of a Windows server core layer. So it becomes, each layer can be quite lightweight and just builds on top of each other. So you don't have the heaviness of a VM where each VM would be in itself an entire stack. So what about this Sitecore on Docker thing? Well, what we need to do to get started is to go and install Docker Desktop. That's a prerequisite. That's where all of the Docker magic itself happens. And then go down to the Sitecore Docker Images repo, build that, grab that repo, and then build the images. You can do that locally or push it up to a repo. Set your local license using a PowerShell script, and then run Docker. Right? It sounds kind of easy, but the first gotcha is make sure Hyper-V is enabled, both in your Windows feature, in your Windows features, but also in your BIOS on your machine. We had we had one of our developers spend a fair bit of time because for some reason his machine didn't have Hyper-V enabled in the BIOS itself. So you can check that. There's a number of ways you can check it, but if you head on over to your task manager, just check for this virtualization enabled setting. That should tell you whether all or most of the settings are correct. You can obviously Google a number of other checks. And also look at the Windows version. So it's not the edition itself, but the specific update of Windows you have installed. Then based on that, you can build images to match that version, which will allow you to make the most advantage of using Docker and the resource sharing. So to build the images, so because I've cloned down that repo, and the most basic thing you need to run is build.ps1, pass in your Sitecore username and password. That's your SDN username and password. The build script will connect to Sitecore servers and download everything that it needs to build the images. So all the web routes and databases and modules and whatever else packages that it needs. And then you can pass in a bunch of optional flags. So there's an include SPE, include SXA, include JSS, build as many or all of them. I'd say it's not going to hurt. You can also include experimental. Experimental would include things like publishing service, and I believe there's a pull request for Horizon as well in another branch, but I think it currently is just a publishing service. If you've already built a bunch of images already, you can also pass in the skip existing image flag to just speed up that build second time round. You can also pass in the versions of Sitecore that you want built. The build script, I think, goes back to 9.01. Older versions are available down to 7.5, I believe. You can pass in an XM, XP, XC topology, depending on what you guys need. OS version, all the way back from 1809 or LTSC 1909. Also 1903, 1909, and even the latest 2004. And that relates to that setting I just showed you in the last slide for the Windows version. And if you want, by default, it will build the images to your local machine and to your local registry. If you want, you can also set up a private container registry somewhere. Make sure it is private and not a public one. Just pass in the details for that, so the URL, the username, the password, then it will build and then push those up. Just a word of warning, when you do build these, it does take a long time, like several hours. I've often just left this running overnight. If you do get any build errors on this, just run it again. I've had that happen a couple of times, unfortunately. So a whole bunch of different images can be built, all the way down from a basic CM topology with XM topology with CM and CD, all the way up to the full stack experience commerce. That's currently what we're running, a full stack experience on our projects at the moment. We're running full stack experience commerce with SPE, SXA, and all the storefront components. So it really does build up every single image possible. So you can build, it'll only use what you need it to use when you're running each topology. And obviously if you're pushing this up into a registry, you don't have to worry about it taking up all of that space on your local machine just with a bunch of images sitting around doing nothing. It will just pull them down as of when you need them. So I'll just pull up that script. So once you've downloaded the that Docker images repo, so you'll see that build.ps1 script at the root folder. Mine is from a little while back, so I don't have the full set, but you can see all the parameters in that script. So just pass in whatever you need as those flags. There are some default sets: LTSE 2019, XM and XB topology, Sitecore 930. This script will build to 902, right? So 930, 920.
I've got many sounds.
Oh, good boy.
This is your old nugget.
That's somebody's.
Old nugget.
What's a nugget?
Warning, danger, child on the loose. Child.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so right. So just take in whatever of these. Take a look at the scripts. Pass in whatever of these flags that you need. If you look in the legacy folder and the images, you'll see that there are some older versions of Sitecore available in there, back to 7.5 for weird reason. No who's using 7.5, but you can build those as well. This particular script won't build them. I believe there's some older instructions available to build those other ones if you do need them as well. If you do want to take a look at what this script is actually doing, go into the modules and this public invoke build script. And around here, you'll see there's a build command. And there's this write message. Just set the verbosity when you're doing the build. You can then see what it's actually doing in the background. It's a useful learning exercise. It's effectively generating the Docker commands to build those images in the background. So it abstracts away a lot of the tough learning, and it's great that you can just run a script and not have to worry too much about what it's doing in the background. But if you're interested, you can jump in there and take a look at that. So like I mentioned earlier, by default, it will build to your local machine. You can upload these images to your own registry. Just make sure it is a private registry. We've been using Azure, and it's costing us about $20 a month or something like that. I'll refresh that. It's super easy to use. Just go ahead, create the registry, set those in the build.ps1 script, and then it'll just create those images and push them up. So the XB standalone here, you can see I've got a 930 build with the LTSE 2019 and 1909. You can go ahead and have a look at some of the details of that. The 930 on 2 Windows versions is taking about 30 gigs. So it's about $20 a month. It saves. If you're working on your own, local registry is fine. But as soon as you get into more than one person, you're going to need a registry of some sort. So then people don't have to keep rebuilding those images every time they want to use them. So to run the containers, how do we do that, right? So we built those images up, now we want to run them. It's a simple case of running Docker compose with the F flag to set what image you want, and up use a D flag so that the output stream from the Docker is not continuously in the PowerShell window. You'll get your PowerShell window back. And then once you're done, you can just Docker compose that down. If you name your Docker compose file, the Docker file to docker-compose.yaml, you don't have to pass in this -f with the image set. With the default repo. These things are living under Windows, tests, 9.3.x or 9.2.x, and then you'll see all of these nice Docker files in here, right? So you've got XC sets, XM sets, XP sets. So probably at a minimum, you're probably going to be wanting to use this SPE at a minimum, I'd say, right? So who doesn't love a bit of PowerShell? It's kind of a bit of a hard requirement these days for most of us. I can just rename this to Docker Compose, and that now becomes my default Docker file. You can even see I put myself a nice little Docker whale icon on that file, just sets that it's the default one. The compose file itself. So while I'm doing that, I'm gonna cheat a bit, and I'm gonna go into a Docker instance that a project that I've Dockerized, and I'll go into that in a second. But while I'm doing that, I'm just gonna have that instance come up because it'll take just a few minutes. Doing that. So the Docker file itself, what that does is so each Docker container is an individual image, and it runs in and of itself within its own containerized environment. Obviously, with Sitecore, there's lots of little services that need to work together. You can't just have a CM instance, right? And unlike a virtual machine or your local machine, you don't want to cram everything on that same instance. It's kind of the whole point of Docker is each little thing can have its own separate container, its own little microservice container. So the Docker Compose file will take all of the things you need to run your Sitecore instance, and just tell it in a single file, tell it how to work together, what the settings should be. Again, you could run these individually from Docker commands, individual Docker commands, but it kind of becomes a little bit difficult and a little bit silly. So with this compose file, you can see I've got a SQL service, I've got a Solr service, I've got some XConnect services, and so I've got a CD service, I've got a CM service, and I don't have any identity in this particular one. And each service tells me there's a variable for a registry, what the image name is, what the Sitecore version is, and what the Windows Service Core number is. And it does that for each of these things. And then we have an environment file which sets a registry, the Windows Server Core number, the Sitecore number, an isolation number, and a bunch of other settings. So the YAML file and the environment file work together, and these variables will just get replaced from whatever you have in this environment file. So I'd end up with, in my particular case, it's a carnivus.azure.io /Sitecore XPE, SQL dev, Sitecore version is 9.3.0, and the Windows Server Core version is 1909. So just do those replacements at runtime, and you can add in custom variables for whatever things that you like. We've introduced a number of them to make it easier, nicer, whatever for us as we're working on different projects. So with that up and running, you can see my Sitecore stack is actually now up. I've got a PowerShell script, I'll show you that in a second, that just runs a Docker up, Docker Compose up in the background. To that. While that's happening in the background, I'm just going to spin up the Sitecore instance now that that Docker container is up. I'll bring that back up as soon as it's up and running. So I mentioned that environment file. You can set a lot of shared and common variables, and you can extend that to add your own with whichever ones that you need. So I mentioned the compose files. Specifies what set of containers should be run together, and that's the thing that allows you to pass those environment variables through as well. So we'll jump into the developer workflow in a second. I have a repo that I can show you how that works. While my Sitecore instance is spinning up, I'll just give you another quick run through on this Docker repo. Close this down. So just out of curiosity, so I mentioned if you want to, once you built the images, head into the Windows tests and the 93x folder. That's where you'll see most of the goodness happening. But if you are curious, go into like the 93 folder, for example, and then you can jump into each layer and have a look at the Docker file within there. And you'll see a bunch of commands which you'll notice they're quite simplistic. They're just doing these very, very simple tasks where they're copying some assets across. They're expanding a zip archive. They're copying it from the temp folder to the C inetpub www root folder. They're renaming a bunch of configs in this particular case. That's disabling the identity server, disabling the identity server, so that's not required as a service. It's copying some tooling. It's running some web config transforms, and then just step by step, all these little micro steps to actually build up the service layer and the image set that you need. And eventually it will go ahead and then configure IIS and run a bunch of other things on the registry. So it is doing these things. It is just these very simple steps to build up that particular image. There are a bunch of settings in the build.json file. So in this particular case, my base image is a Microsoft base image, and I'm passing in a bunch of other assets and stuff. Equally, you can take a look at another layer, for example, the SPE layer here. If you take a look at the build.json, you'll see that our starting point is probably not a good one. Let's take a look at that. There you go. If you take a look at the SXA layer, you'll see that our starting layer is actually Sitecore XP SPE as opposed to the Windows one. So we've already got that base layer with Sitecore now installed. So we'll just take that and we'll build our SXA layer, SPE layer on top, and then our SXA layer on top of that. And then again, that has a corresponding Docker file, which again just has these very simple steps. Take some packages, expand the archive, go ahead and copy that into the inetpub folder. So this would be the SXA package in this particular case. Then copy across a bunch of tooling. So again, it's just these really small steps, each one step by step, building on the last set of images that we have. So our Sitecore instance is up and running, and I can now log into the admin, and I should have a very clean Sitecore instance running with SPE and SXA. Still got a slight lag with obviously Sitecore's recycle time. There's not a lot that we can do to get away from that, but if you have enough RAM, you can at least work around that and work around that slight issue as much as possible. when we need some lift room waiting music. We're getting there, almost there. There you go. So there's no particular magic in this. It's just a very clean Sitecore instance at this moment in time. We're not, we don't have anything in there. We haven't synced anything in there yet. I'll go through that in a second, but that will this will essentially be your starting point. So I will go through this developer workflow. I'll just bring that to the side again. So just run through this developer workflow as to how much different is it from how you would normally work, right? So you have a local IIS instance, a local SQL instance. So this was one of the things that was really weird for us when we started. It's a bit difficult to get your head around. You know, what is this thing doing? How can I run this and, you know, work locally? How do I deploy? How do I do these kinds of things? And the reality of it was that it wasn't that much different, right? It was a little bit different, and you just kind of needed to figure out how the pieces of this puzzle fit together. And after that, I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And once you understand the internal mechanics, it makes even more sense. Okay, it's just doing this. It's okay. It's not that clever, like, you know. But it does take a little bit of playing around with. So I'll go through with that in a second. One of the things that had caught us out was the fact that containers are volatile. So I have my this is a Docker dashboard. You can see all my running containers at the moment. Now, when I go ahead and I stop this thing and my containers will shut down, anything that's happened inside of that container is lost. So again, think like Azure paths, right? When you turn those containers off, there, anything that's happened within those containers are gone. They've disappeared. So things like your log files, any images that you may have added, you know, onto the file system, anything that you may have actually deployed onto the file system, right? You're going back to clean. So when I mentioned earlier that we can have these repeatable environments with Docker, this is exactly why. Because as soon as I shut down my Docker instance, everything within that Docker instance is lost. But then that gives you the question: is like, okay, well, what about all my stuff, right? I don't want to lose everything every time I shut down my Docker instance. No, I've got things in there, and this is where volume mounts come in. It's a way of getting data both in and out of your containers, and it also allows you to persist your data. So things like your SQL databases, your logs, anything else that you might want to keep in between restarts. Be a bit careful with Git and empty folders. If you create these volume mounts, what will happen is you'll have these folders in there, and you'll generally tend to create it like this. And when you go to check it in, Git will go, "Oh, that's an empty folder. There's no need to bother checking that in." So just make sure you've got some sort of file in there. We use Git keep. You can use a README if you really wanted to. It doesn't really matter. Just have a file in there. Don't have empty folders, otherwise your teammates won't get those folders across. So with the volumes, you need to specify those volume mounts in your Docker Compose files. Just be careful that when you grab the ones from the Sitecore repo, the Compose files in here don't have any volume mounts specified. They have one for the SQL environment, but they don't have one for the CM environment. So you get a nice clean version of Sitecore up, but you can't actually deploy anything into it until you've created those volume mounts. So you do get some clean data folders in here, but you need to specify those volume mounts. I don't know why we don't have that to begin with. But what you're essentially doing is you specify on the left side of the semicolon your local folder, and on the right side of that semicolon, you're specifying the folder that you want to map it to inside of your Docker instance, right? So in this case, this C source is inside of my running Docker instance. Same with the inet pub folder and the unicorn folder. And my local ones are data CM, examples, Helix Basic Unicorn, and this startup folder. I'll just show you that in here. I have a CM and I have a www root folder here, which maps to this one, this first one here. My exam, I have a startup folder that's easier to show. And although in here I have an examples, basic unicorn, what do they have there? Source. So it's just mapped to this folder. You can use a fixed path on there. So if you wanted to hard code it to a C or a D or something like that, you could. Obviously try and keep it relative. It will just make it easier for your teammates as their and they can have it in whatever directory structure they want there. I will show you this stuff in action in a second once I've done a deployment. But yeah, I'll show you that in a second. So then we come on to another gotcha. When you create these mounts, make sure you're mounting to an existing folder. We've often added, a couple of times we've added a mount to a Docker, added a mount here, and the folder doesn't exist within our file structure. And of course, it won't create it locally, at least on the the left-hand side of that semicolon. It won't create it, so it'll get a bit stuck. Don't mount to an existing folder inside of the container itself, right? And by that I mean when we did our mounts, what we done for the CM is we are mounting from our www root folder to C source. We're not mounting directly to the inetpub www root folder, because if I did that, what I'm actually telling it to do is make this thing match this thing exactly. In a normal Docker world, that would work, but since we're in the Sitecore Docker world, that's not going to work. You'll notice that in my data CM folder, my www root folder, I actually have 0 Sitecore files in here. When I do a deployment, I'll deploy my own code into this folder. That will, from this folder, it will get replicated into this C source folder. There's then a watch file script that has been created. It's in here somewhere. It's a PowerShell script. That will then copy it to this folder. So it layers on top of your existing Sitecore install. And that's what you do locally anyway. It's just there's a bit of a skip and a hop before it does its final jump into its final destination. Also be careful as a result of that when you're deleting files and folders from your local mounts. This one caught us out a few times. As when the first time we did it, we were like, what's going on? Where's happened to all our files? Because of this watch file, because of this watch script, if you have, I'm not going to create this because it will mess up my local instance that's running. If I have a folder in here called Sitecore, and then within that folder I have, let's say I've gone into the admin screens and I've created a new app of some sort, and I deploy this. and then I decide, oh, you know what, that wasn't so good after all, so I'll delete that file, and that's fine. That watch script will replicate that within the container, and it will delete that file. And then I go back and go, okay, well, this folder is now empty, so what I'll do is I'll delete that. And if that was a Sitecore folder, the watch script goes, oh, okay, cool, I'll just replicate that, and then boom, my Sitecore folder is now just been deleted from within my container. Just keep a watch on that. It does exist too, obviously. If you're deploying a file that you meant to overwrite another one, you delete it, it's then being deleted, it's not getting replaced with the original one. If you have that issue, just do a Docker compose down and then spin it back up again. You'll get a clean back to normal instance up and running again. And then because of these volume mount and the data persistence, your code will just get, as soon as you start back up, anything that you have within this folder and by the volume mounts will just get pushed back into the container itself. We have a SQL folder that has all of your persisted SQL databases. That's the reason that when you stop and start, you're not going to be losing all of your items and everything else within your Sitecore instance, as well as a Solar folder, for example, for all the indexes. So that's the reason for those volume mounts, and that's the reason you can still persist the data between stop and start and still get these clean and repeatable environments to deploy into every single time. So we also have some entry point scripts. They define what happens when a container starts up each time. There's some out of the box, which is a development.ps1 as well as a production.ps1 if you really wanted to. Feel free to go ahead and overwrite those and have your own. So we've got a startup script in this location. Just be mindful that that startup script is via amounts, so that will allow me to have a local set of scripts, and I can do whatever I want in that script. In this particular case, I've got a script here which will run the initial development one anyway, and then go and find add an HTTPS binding. Useful for, and you can do whatever things you want at that point. I mentioned that file watch, development.ps1 script will invoke that file watcher and act as that mediator, copying between C source and the www root folder. And with that, let me jump across to another repo, and let's actually start to do a deployment. So I've been showing you this Helix examples folder throughout. What I had done for this is actually taken the Sitecore Helix examples repo. I forked that across and I made a bunch of changes. Not too many changes, but I deleted all of the deployment scripts that they had because they were set for local setup. And that's probably the major change that I made on this project. And then I went and changed a couple of settings. The main setting, one of the main settings being the unicorn source folder location. It was set via a script to whatever your local folder path was, and I just changed it to secret unicorn. The reason is I have a folder mount, a volume mount to that unicorn folder. So what I'm saying is take my local source folder and map that to the unicorn folder inside of the container. So once I've deployed, this makes sense because my deployed instance, it's in C unicorn inside of the container itself. I changed the publish location from, again, C, inetpub, www root, Helix Docker examples to point to my Docker data volume mount that I have created. and I deployed a live mode.config just so that I don't have to publish. So here. Deploy scripts. What this, I've got a deploy script as well, and what that will do is this project uses Helix publishing pipeline. So normally I'd go in here and I would right click on this and then do a publish, or you do one click publish, and then that's going to deploy out to my Helix, to my Docker data folder. And then once that's deployed, I'd go into the browser, I'd bring up unicorn.aspx and then wait for that to load and then run sync all of the items one by one. So we've just streamlined that a little bit by having a script to do that for us. So it's deployed at PS1 script, so it doesn't do anything too clever. It's got a URL and a unicorn sync secret. You can pull that up from other configs if you wanted to. It takes the website project. It will figure out what version of MS Build to use. It will then NuGet restore all the packages, call MS Build, run the deploy on build, then call that local publish profile. So it is just doing exactly what you would in Visual Studio, but PowerShell. And then it goes ahead and calls the sync unicorn. So once that kicks in, there you go. Unicorn is now just kicking off. So you can see our progress within that, and just leave that to run for a few minutes, and it will go ahead and do the things that it needs to do. The other thing that you saw me do earlier was just to run a start command. It's not doing anything overly clever. The main thing it's doing is it's running Docker Compose, Docker Compose up, and then calling Wales names. So the Docker Compose up, we've got a bit of a custom solution for this. So this environment file is a Docker thing, right? And you can pass in which set of environment variables to load. By default, it always loads this .env. We have a solution to be able to override those settings in a .env.user file. So we have different team members on different versions of Windows, for example, so they can go ahead and have this specific file locally, and because it's a .user file, the default settings for Git is to ignore this file. It won't then affect your other teammates. It's useful in like large teams and cross company teams where you can't guarantee everybody's going to be on the exact version of Windows, for example. There's also a stop script, which again doesn't do anything too overly clever. It just does a Docker Compose down and shuts down your local system. It's one for a restart, to just restart the Docker service. Every once in a while, you might just find it just becomes a bit stuck. You just need to restart the Docker service. And we also have a clean data script. This is available in the default repo as well. They use PowerShell to do their clean. We have updated that to not use PowerShell, but just to use a default Docker clean command, Git clean command, and rely on that to make it match what the things we have checked in. We've also added this include database flag in there. So if I want to run this, it will delete my code and my Solr indexes, but it won't delete my databases, because a lot of times I do want to keep those. I just want to clean out my code. Maybe I've deployed something which is wrong or too much, and then I can just delete that and start again without having to worry about having to go through this entire sync process for Docker as well. So while that is up, I mentioned Wales names. That's an npm package. Install it globally at least once, just once on your local machine. And that keeps a watch on Docker, and it will then update your host file with any changes to the IP addresses, because obviously those IP addresses will get recycled every time you restart. And that way you can use nice names, and actual host names for your Docker instances, rather than just relying on some arbitrary weird name that Docker will assign out of the box. There's a number of different ways of doing this, but we just happen to be using Wales names, and the sample repo that I have here, that's what it's using. And okay, so that's running. It's doing its publish. So I can pull up the instance. Just restart that. I'll just run that. Just a case of waiting for these things again, but well, those two things are doing their lovely thing. I'll just bring up some tooling. So one of the things is the tooling, right? We were trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we connect to our tools and to our services? There's a SQL instance running, there's a Solo instance running, there's obviously some IIS things happening in the background. SQL one is pretty straightforward. So that's our front end. I've got this set to live mode, so our website is now up and running. The SQL one is pretty easy, right? So if we take a look at our Docker dashboard, we can see that we've got this SQL instance running. I can grab the instance name from here, and then I can actually log in. The password is set in the environment file. So the .env file, you can see this super long string in here. So just grab that. Put that in there. And there we have. We're just connected to that SQL instance. So think of it like connecting to a SQL Azure instance or a SQL instance on some VM somewhere in your data center. You don't particularly care. It's not on your local machine. That's all you know. But you're using the management studio to connect to it as you would anything else. Because of those containers, as I mentioned, because of those mounts and the way that the mounts work with persisting data, you can actually access those MDF files. I could copy those, give those to a colleague, and then they could just dump the MDF files in there themselves. Equally, you could take a backup from production or some other environment, or just grab the LDF and the MDF files. You can just drop them into here. If you name them exactly as it is here, it will attach into the SQL instance. You could actually just add any old web MDF, LDF files in there, and the entry point startup scripts for that SQL instance, SQL container will just attach any LDF and MDF files it finds in this folder. We've been doing this recently, for example, for a migration where we've just dropped in a master.8.2 LDF as well, and then just drop in your config. You can actually just also, if you wanted to, you can just hit a restore database or attach database. Just be sure that when you do that, the location that you select on that's for the restore screen matches your mount. So in this case, you'd be restoring it to C data, not to the location on your local machine, on your host machine itself. So that's that one. Solar is a fairly simple one as well. So in this instance, I can actually just click on my Solar instance, and then there's a open in browser. And there I have all of my Solar instances, all of my cores and everything else, and then I can go in and do whatever I want to do in here, or run whatever queries I want to run in there as well. The other one that's come up for us is IIS. Now, by default, with IIS, you're not going to need to do this very often, right? There's very little reason for you to connect to IIS. If you wanted to, you could enable remote management of IIS. You need to install a module onto your local IIS management console, and then what you would need to do is, I have a script in here called enable remote IIS. So inside of the container itself, I need to enable it to allow remote connections. So it's got a very simple script that will do that. Takes a little while, but since I don't have this set up into my startup script with the entry point script, I can kind of cheat, and I can run the unicorn sync failed, but I could run a docker exec command, and I can actually PowerShell into the Docker container itself. So I'm now running inside of the Docker container, so I can actually go in and and you'll see that's actually inside of the container, and I have all of my Sitecore things, for example. Now, what I can also do is I have a volume mount for that script. And I can actually run that PowerShell script. That's going to go ahead, download that remote IIS management module and install that and configure it, and allow me to then connect using this username and password. Once that's done its thing, I would be able to connect to that server. I can then pick that username, put in that password, and in theory connect once it's done its thing. So this isn't something that you need to do very often. I had it come up because I was chasing down some sort of issue that we had, and I'm quite a visual person, so I prefer tools running rather than running a whole bunch of PowerShell commands to figure out exactly what the settings are. And this would be what I would normally do anyway, right, on a local machine. So it's just that familiarity, right? So that was something that I think that should connect. Okay, so I can then connect, finish that, and then I can see that I've actually connected to the IIS instance within my container itself, and then I can view all of those files and everything else that's within those. I can go in here, I can take a look at my bindings and any other settings that I need to. So that those three sets of tools are probably the things that we would use most often, right? And while I'm here in Visual Studio, so the other sets of tools that we found useful is there's a Docker extension for VS Code. Will show you all of your running containers. You can attach shell, which was essentially what I just did, using PowerShell directly, but it just, you don't have to type anything. That's a bit easier. You can restart the service, you can stop the service, you can open it in the browser, you can hit and inspect, you can even remove it. You can view all your images locally and in the Azure containers and a bunch of other things within the tooling. In Visual Studio itself, if you're running Visual Studio 2019 version 16.5 upwards, go to View, Other Windows, Containers. You'll get a similar view, so you can see all of your running containers. You can stop them, you can restart them, you can delete and remove the container. You can open the terminal window again, attach a shell, and run a PowerShell command from within the Docker container itself. But it also you can also view environment variables, so all of the things that I've set in my compose file. I can view my ports, I can view my logs, and I can also has a nice file browser, which allows you to see what's going on inside of the container. So I can see that I've got my all my Sitecore files, even though I don't have them in my local mount, right? I mentioned that earlier. I can take a look at the bin folder. To load. I'll see all of my Sitecore DLLs in there, but I'll also see my custom ones from this project that have also been deployed. The nice thing about this file browser is I can go through and I can pick up all of my configs, and then I can actually take a look at them, right? So I can open that. Click that open, and you can see that my config files have opened. So yeah, that's a nice way of doing looking at those files. So you can also do it from within the PowerShell window if you wanted to. And that will at least output the file contents into the window as well. So a number of different ways of working with that. I showed you the Docker dashboard as well earlier. That has very similar things that you can do with that. You can view the streaming logs. You can hit the inspect tabs, which will show you all the variables. It will show you the mounts, so the internal mount, the mount on your local machine, as well as the ports. And the stats window is quite handy to see how much memory and things are being used. The final part of this is debugging. So that's the other one, right? So we've got some code running and we've got some issue and we don't know what is wrong with it. So how do we connect to that instance and debug the code? And this is, again, this bit of tooling is entirely something that's in Visual Studio 2019 version 16.5 onwards. So if you're on 2017 or an earlier version of 2019, recommendation would be to upgrade, because this just makes it so much more easier. In the background, this is attaching a remote debugger inside of your container and handling all of that for you. If you have an earlier version of Visual Studio, you'll have to add an extra mount, have the startup script do that for you. And when you're selecting this connection target, for example, you'll have to specify the IP address or the machine name yourself. So it's not as easy to find the thing. When you do mount, when you do go to attach, just be careful here. The default is automatic. If you do that, then it's not going to hit your breakpoints. Just debug these code types and select the managed. Hit OK, select the W3P process, and hit attach. And then you would just go to any bit of code as you would normally and set your breakpoints on there. And in theory, it will hit your breakpoints. There you go. How am I doing for time, Bruce? You'll get there eventually. Let's see if we got. So you can see I also had the basic company had also synced in from that earlier Unicorn sync, as you would have expected. Did it hit?
Is Bruce still there?
I think he's fallen asleep.
Yeah.
That would eventually sleep. That would eventually work. I guess something's got stuck. That I might need to restart that instance. But you would just hit the breakpoints as per normal then. And you can go ahead and hit downside for this thing.
I think I've just checked the schedule, and I think you might be about half hour over. So we might need to.
I'm wrapping up. Yeah, let's move on from that one.
Is that how you doing for time? Yeah, half hour over.
Yeah, that's about right. So I'm pretty much done, right? So there's a bunch of there's loads of community members that have been blogging about this thing. I started off on this blog post with Mark Cassidy from last October or so, and he'd been banging on about Docker, and how wonderful it is. So go take a read of that. Rob Allen has a great intro into Docker with Sitecore and goes into a lot more detail on building images and that kind of stuff. So he presented that at SubCon, so have a good read through that as well. The sample code that I showed you for that project is all available on this repo, this forked repo. So download it, build your images, and feel free to use some of those scripts that I provided in there. With that, I am done finally.
Have you guys tried pushing? Have you guys tried pushing this beyond dev to any sort of prod environments or anything?
No, so we haven't, but mainly because we just don't have enough experience with it. But there have been some community members that have said that they have pushed it to prod for several years. And it is now supported by Sitecore as well, which is great. Yep. So if
we've done it with for commerce projects recently. So,
okay, with Docker.
Yep. Probably might be something I don't think too many have. Might be a topic we talk about. No,
we're running a commerce project with Docker right now. Actually, I'd say that we're running the full stack, and yeah, it's a godsend because you tend to mess up your local instance a lot. So being able to revert,
setting up a prod environment for cycle commerce, it's nuts. So
yeah, exactly, and even your local machine, right? Trying to set that up across 5, 6, 10 developers is painful.
I think there's a bunch of guys on the call who have been using it in a few projects, but we've got got some new builds running now with using Terraform, scripting out AKS environments to push out to, just because it's a bit simpler. Simpler than trying to set up 1,000 roles to support commerce and prod.
Yeah, that's something we will be looking at in the future for sure.
Yeah, well, it definitely works. It's good, particularly with AKS supporting Windows. That was the last piece. So we had stuff running before that, but the moment they officially supported Windows, start to push a few clients over to it.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, Cameroos. And I know it's like 4 a.m. and you're like, oh, you still look so fresh. Remarkable.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, thank you. So look, next up, we've got a now the amazing Rodrigo. Hugo couldn't join us. Hugo Santos, because he's got a little one, and it's the wee hours of the morning there. But I'm going to attempt to play a video. He very kindly did an amazing video recording from Where to Go with Covio, which is an amazing search solution. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen and play that now. Please hold for technical difficulties. Caller. Let's have a look. Looks like, yeah, if I share that. And press play and turn the volume up. If it's not working, just tell me.
Hello everyone. Welcome to my presentation. This is Hugo Santos here, and this is the New Zealand Sitecore user group. Thank you very much, Bruce, for having me. Bruce is such an amazing guy. You guys already know that, but he's the best one. Thank you very much, Bruce. Today's presentation is going to be about Covio, right? So as you guys already know, we're going to be talking a little bit about Covio and how we can come from 0 to 1. The goal here is just take the package from scratch, so you don't even have the package installed on your Sitecore instance, until the point where you have a fully functional search page. That's the goal. And by the end of the presentation, you guys should be able to do that. One thing which is very important is that if you guys have any question at all about anything I said during the presentation, please take notes. And let's just make sure that you guys shoot me those questions through Slack or Twitter. It's up to you. But I would be more than happy to answer those questions, right? Don't keep them to yourself. For those who I don't know yet, nice to meet you all. This is Hugo Santos here. Sitecore MVP 2020. I've been working with Sitecore during the last 6 years. 4 of those years, I've been working with Covio as well, the last 4 years. And I'm basically working with Microsoft since 2009. I'm currently at the head of the search practice and solution architect at Conabus, and nice to meet you all. Very quick overview about the presentation. What is the goal? The goal is basically, I'm going to be starting by explaining a little bit what is Covio. So people know Covio for being a search provider. Yeah, sure, but it's more than that. Let's just talk about that. Let's just install and configure the package live on a real Sitecore instance. We spent some time talking about the Covio Cloud Platform as well, which is a huge part of a Covio for Sitecore project. Then we're going to be back to the Sitecore world, and let's just talk about the Covio Command Center. And the last thing is, let's create a new search page. That's the coolest part, right? Yeah, sure. Let's start with that. So what is Covio after all? Yeah, Covio is known for being one of the possible search providers when it comes to Sitecore. And yeah, it is that, of course. That's part of Covio. But it's more than that, actually. So Covio started with indexing content and being able to fetch those contents later with queries, and that's search. But during the period of time that they've been working with Sitecore, they decided to do more than that. So they started by capturing all the events and signals which are generated during the interaction between users and search page. The search page itself will have a search box, right? So every single time that a Covio user is typing some kind of keywords on that search box, Covio will keep those signals. They will keep that on their database. If the user decides to use a filter, so click on a filter option, Covio will keep that on the database as well. And finally, if the user decides to click in a result, again, Covio will keep that on the database. At the beginning, they used to use those informations, that data, to create those dashboards so that they can show the marketers that people were using for real the search interface, which was fine. I mean, that's fine, that's cool, that's really cool. But a few years later, they just realized that they had a lot of information about how people interact with the search page. So they just came up with this machine learning model, which is basically analyzing the interactions between user and page and changing real time the relevance. So they're increasing the relevance over time by just analyzing situations like, okay, people are searching for PlayStation 4. And every single time they do that, they're always clicking on the third result. The third result is the best one. So why not just change a little bit the relevance and put that third result as the second one and reanalyze later. So they do that and they keep watching. And a few weeks later, okay, people are still clicking on that result. Let's just make it the first one. And they do that automatically because they are using machine learning. So they're basically doing that for every single possible keyword that you have on your system, for every single possible result set, which is actually, that's impossible to do that manually. So they are using machine learning. That's the only way they can leverage the amount of information that they have about the usage analytics. And that's pretty much what Covil is. Covil is a search engine and a relevance engine as well. So you have search, of course, but you have more than that. You are making sure that you have relevance when you're using Covil. And as you guys already know, if you are working with Sitecore, there are a lot of options when it comes to search on your Sitecore. So when analyzing which one you should be using, just ask yourself if the relevance is a big deal. Because sometimes, to be honest, it is not. Sometimes you just want to sort by date or sort by alphabetically order. On those cases, just don't use Covil. It's a waste of money. It's way too much expensive for those scenarios. But if in your case you end up realizing that relevance will bring you more value, will bring you your client more money or anything like that, you should be evaluating Covil for sure, right? Let's just move on to the presentation, the coolest part. I'm going to be starting by downloading the Covil package. So if you don't have the Covil package, it is publicly available. Just go to the site, Covil for Sitecore page. You'll have a few different options here. Just take the latest one. They're always releasing, as you can see here. The releases are pretty frequent, actually. Go to download. Just pick the right version that you are using. On my case, I'm using A2, and boom. Let's open the Sitecore instance, and you're going to be installing the package such as any other package that you already have. Nothing fancy. Agree everything, next, and done. During that period of time, Sitecore are going to be scoping all the items present on the package. So Covil has a lot of items, renderings, even a search example page, layouts, and etc. They're also coping the users, and they're also coping the resources. So the views, HTML, JavaScript, and styles that's been copied as well to your instance. But there's a separated part of the resources, which are the configuration files. Covil comes with a different set, a bunch of configuration files, actually more than just one, but they are not configured yet. Those configuration files will come with some default values. There is just to make sure that you're not refreshing the IIS pool during the installation process. But once the installation is finished, you will see that we're going to have a new page open here. So it's part of the Sitecore package, a page, which is the configuration page. And on that page, we're going to be able to inform Covil who we are, okay? And that's called the organization. So I will spend some time talking about organization real quickly. So here's the page, okay? Activate Covil Sitecore package, boom. And that's the page. So I'm gonna just log in real quickly with my account. And there you go. So you can either select an already existing organization, or you can create a new one. So for most of you, you guys don't know anything about Covil, let's just say that. So you're going to be creating your first one. What is an organization, right? What is this organization thing? I keep getting that question a lot, and the easiest way to answer that question is you have a company. So you work for a company, or you have a client, and that client's a company. An organization is a company profile on the Covil Cloud platform, and that's it. So when you are communicating with the Covil Cloud platform, you need to tell them who you are, and that's your organization. So when you are indexing some content, you need to inform them, okay, I am company A. So you just send them your organization ID, and when you need to query those results, you're going to do the same. So, okay, I am company A, give me my results for that keyword. And that's the organization. So it's a virtual concept that you have on the cloud platform. So inside your organization, you're going to have one or more indexes. You're going to have one or more ranking rules, one or more pipelines, and all those concepts. I will be explaining them in a few minutes, but just keep that in mind. And your organization is a unit. So you have everything you need inside of it, but they are not able to communicate with each other. So if you have, when you're set up, and you see that you need more than one organization, probably there is a mistake. You should be using one organization with multiple indexes. That's the correct way of doing that, right? So let's just create our organization, which is going to be New Zealand SUG. Take a trial. It's valid for 30 days and it's renewable for more 30 days, should be more than enough. You can choose between indexing or not, your permissions. On my case, I don't have any permissions at all, so I'm going to just keep that box unchecked. It's more performant if you're not indexing permissions. When it comes to content, you can index the HTML. So basically, instead of just indexing the Sitecore item in the fields, you are indexing the page, which is awesome because you have all the different renderings, you have all the different components on it, and you are making sure that basically if there is a word on your page and that word is not coming from one of the fields on your item, you are going to be still be able to fetch that result because you are indexing the entire HTML. It is more, actually when you use that option, you are making sure that your search is more relevant. But there is a price, right? Because during the indexing process, Covil will basically fetch. So it's going to be hitting your CD during that time. So just keep that in mind. You may experience some sort of performance issues during that time. So if that's the case, just make sure that you're planning correctly the time on which you're going to be executing the index review, right? Farm names and other configuration, pretty advanced, and I'm going to be talking about that right now. And you have the Sitecore credentials, which in my case is admin B, and that's it. When I click on activate, Covil is basically getting all those informations that I informed and putting all that data on the configuration files, which you remember that I told that those have default values. So right now they're configured, and that's going to trigger an IIS pull reset. That's why it takes some time until you have your command center page back again. And that's it. You just install the configure your Covil for Sitecore package, which is pretty cool because it took what, 5 minutes, probably less than that. That's pretty awesome. That's the command center, and the name is pretty clear. Here is where you command entirely your Covil for Sitecore package. So don't worry about configuration files when dealing with Covil. You should not be required to open a single configuration file, honestly. Let's just say, for example, that you need to change the form name that you just informed during the configuration process. There is, you can use that page. Or even the Sitecore user, you end up realizing that you cannot use the admin. You should be using a dedicated user, so a Covil admin. You just go here and change everything. So you should not be required to open the Covil configuration files, which is pretty cool because you have the command center. But you can do more than that, actually. You can even inform Covil and Sitecore which fields should be indexed during the process. So as you can see here, we have all the templates, pretty much all the templates present on your Sitecore, and you can pick the fields that you need to, which is pretty cool. Out of the box, Covil tries to keep that list as simple as possible. So instead of having all the fields indexed and then you need to exclude them, you have just the most basic fields there, and you are responsible for informing Covil that you need to index that field or other fields. So basically, guys, keep that in mind. If the field here is checked, that's going to be part of your indexed content. Otherwise, it is just ignored. Correct? That's cool. And finally, the most important part of the command center, which is the indexes themselves. So when it comes to Covil for Sitecore, actually that's a concept on the Sitecore at large. So you have two indexes. You have the index for master, for web, and If that's the case, you have a third one for public. That's a very basic setup. So you have the master and web. And you can use that page right here to index those contents. So instead of just using the indexing manager, which is known for giving us very little feedback, let's just put like that, you can use that page, which is more complete. You can basically click on rebuild all and see the magic happen here. So they rebuild, when it comes to Sitecore, the rebuild is more than just indexing and crawling and doing that. So the first phase is setup requirements, which is basically a synchronization between your configuration right here on your instance and the configuration on the Covio Cloud, which is the second part of the equation. So that part is just for that. We want to make sure that all the fields that we have here are also part of the cloud and vice versa. Setting permissions, if you're indexing your permissions, that's on my case right here. And that's finally the crawling process. So you have the Sitecore's items crawled, sent to the Covio Cloud platform. And after that, it takes some time to index that content because there is some processing, right? Covio will process that content instead of just getting as it is. It's gonna clean up a little bit. It's gonna put some sort of ranking strategy side of it. So instead of just finishing that part and taking for granted that the Sitecore item is already ready, there is a fourth phase, which is the documents validation. So the package here will wait until those documents which were sent on the previous phase are reachable. And that may take some time. It depends a lot on the performance on the Covio Cloud platform. To be honest, it will depend a lot, not necessarily on your organization, but that's a shared resources. So if Covio has a lot of traffic during that period of time, it's going to take a little bit more than usual, which is not the end of the world. It doesn't take hours, it's just a few minutes, but I'm just explaining to you guys because it may happen, right? As you can see here, we have different crawlers. So on my case, I have two crawlers, one for content and another one for media library. You can add them if you need to. The only way to do that is by changing the configuration. So if you end up needing that, that's one of the scenarios on which you have to deal with configurations. Otherwise, if you're okay with them, you're gonna be able to use that page to refresh those crawlers. So instead of rebuilding the entire index, because you can also rebuild just one index, right? There is a button right here. So you can also refresh one or two, or if three, if you have more than that, crawlers. And that's true for all the indexes that you have. Let's analyze one thing with the cloud platform. Because you guys remember that I mentioned that phase, the first phase, is a synchronization between Sitecore and our platform. Let's just open the cloud platform and see what we have there. So this is the cloud platform. Here you can pick the right organization that you need to. And there it is. We have a lot of different things to talk about when it comes to cloud search platform. The first one is the sources, because that's the first one that we're going to see. So you remember that on the Sitecore side, we had two different indexes. All right, so on the Covio Cloud side, within our organization, those two indexes are going to be represented by two different sources. You may have one or more sources. Usually, there is a one-to-one relationship between a Sitecore indexes and a Covio source, but you can also have external sources. So you can basically add sources for any one of those contents providers. So within your Sitecore, you're going to be indexing and searching the Sitecore. So when you're using master, that's going to be master. When you're going to be using the web, that's going to be web. But if you have a different project with different needs and you need to fetch data from an external website or even Dropbox or you name it, you may need to add an external source and adapt your search page to go fetch the data not only from the current web or master index, but also for the external data source, right? So that's the concept of source, and that's very important because when you're going to be using the Covio search page on Sitecore, you don't need to worry about master or web. There is embedded logic within the package, which is responsible for identifying the current database matching that database with one of those indexes, and then translated the index name to the source name. So here's my computer name. That's this instance name. So Coveo knows that, right? So they can, once they have the index name, they can kind of guess the source name and use it to filter the results from your search page to that source only. So that means that if you're indexing, if you're actually searching on master by using the experience editor, for instance, you're going to be seeing the results from that source. And if you're using the CD, for instance, the content delivery manager, the content delivery instance, you're going to be using the web. So you will not be able to see the master items, which is important, right? Because you don't want our final users being able to see what our content authors are doing on master and vice versa. And that's possible due to the concept of source. That's cool. I think it's pretty clear. One other thing which is very important, the fields. So remember that here we had our fields, and that's 100% Sitecore. Those fields right here are related to Sitecore templates. So every single one of them that we have checked are going to be created on the Coveo side. So let's just pick one of them, language, right? So if you go here, we should have language, and that's the field that's going to be used by our sources. So use it on 2 sources, and those 2 sources are basically our sources. So as you can see here, we can not only manage the sources, because you can delete your source if you need to for a given reason, but you can also manage the fields that you have. And there are a few different configurations for each one of them. That's pretty advanced. I won't enter on those details, but you can basically inform Coveo if a given field should be used as part of the free text search. So if it is part of the free text search, I will be able to find a document by using that field. Otherwise, the field is still there. It is used for ranking options, but I cannot filter out or filter in that item by just using that field. Again, that's a very complicated concept. That's for phase 2. Right now, let's focus on the most basic ones. One cool part of this is that you can also use the Coveo Cloud platform to search through your items. So you don't even necessarily need to have search page ready to start searching. You can just do what I did, which is click on your source, more, and open what they call the content browser. That's a search page. To be honest, pretty simple search page. You have a search box, you have filters, and you have results right here. The only thing is that those results are the pages that we have on our Sitecore. So if I open my content editor, we're going to be able to see that I have pages with those names. So page 3C, 3A, 2C, and etc. And that's cool because sometimes you just want to test something real quickly. You don't even need to create a search page in order to be able to do that. You just go here and you can open that item, or you can even inspect it. You just hold Alt, the key, and double click on it. By doing that, you are able to see every single indexed field. So there are a lot of fields. Don't worry about that. They are advanced, but just know that because in the future, you will need that information for sure. One last thing which is very, very important on the Coveo Cloud platform is what they call the query pipelines. That's one of those abstract concepts that I will try to give you guys a very short summary and try to explain in a few words. So just imagine the query pipeline as a path, as a way. When you do a query, when you send a query to Coveo Cloud platform, do remember that you need to inform your organization IT, right? So you basically inform them who you are. On our case, we are ZNSUG4774RSR9. That's our organization ID. You can have it right here if you need to. But you can also inform it the path. And what is this path? It's a set of operations that will be executed during the query. And every single time that you create a new organization, you will have a default one right here. And again, that's a set of operations, right? So you have machine learning as part of it. In the future, you'll be able to create a machine learning model and associate that model to your pipeline so that every single time that a query passes through your pipeline or your path, the machine learning is going to be applied to the query. You have thesaurus, so you can basically inform code view that. Let's just expand cat to dog. So if I search for cats, I want results from dog and vice versa. That's just an example, very dumb example, but you got the point, right? You have featured results. So if for a given reason, you have business requirement that require that every single time that someone search for cat, please show them this page at the top. Always. I don't care if it is relevant or not. That's a very important product, and I want that product to be the first one every single time that someone looks for cat. And that's going to be applied for every single query. Just keep that in mind, right? So if you have different search pages with different needs, just create a second pipeline and adapt accordingly. You have stop words, very, very basic, straightforward. You even have the ranking expressions. So that's cool. That's really cool. You can inform CodeView that I want to boost a little bit manually. So you remember that you can boost by using machine learning. Okay, it's going to be adaptive, but you can also do that manually. I'm going to boost every single query that contains cat, and I want to boost that according to that condition by a lot, or I want to decrease those results. It's up to you. Advanced concept, yes, but it's very useful. So in the future, you may need that. Just keep that in mind. A lot of different things. So filters, you can filter out, you can have filter rules, okay, on your pipeline when the query is dog. So never show those results because I don't want them. And you can have the query parameters, which are even more advanced. It's not worth the time. That's for phase 2. But as you can see here, the cloud platform is pretty complete. You can do a lot of things on your cloud platform. That's CodeView, that's not Sitecore. So we end up using Sitecore as our search provider here, our content provider, but that's 100% CodeView. So you can use that with Salesforce. You can use that with Dynamics. You can use that with ServiceNow. Or you can even use that on your standalone website. It's up to you. On our case, we're using with Sitecore. Okay? So we have our index here. It should be ready by, yeah, so as you can see here, our indexes are ready. So we have a few documents on every single one of them. The fourth phase is done. It took 20 minutes, 13 minutes ago. It was slowly than usual, and there is a reason why. The reason why is that we just created the organization. So it takes some time to the organization be ready, and that's usually 10 minutes. So when you create an organization, it takes 10 minutes to that organization to be ready to receive documents, and after that, your index process will trigger it. So if you need to rebuild that later again, it should take, I don't know, probably 10 minutes, because you won't need the first 10 minutes again, right? And we have different documents here on web as well. That's cool. That's awesome. What is the next phase? So now we have the index is ready. Our pipeline is ready. All we need is a search page. So let's just go there and create that search page. Instead of having to open your Visual Studio, create a lot of views, components, MVCs, and etc., when it comes to Sitecore and CodeView, you have what they call the Hive framework. Hive framework is a set of renderings that are already there. So as you can see here, you can open renderings, CodeView Hive, and a bunch of different renderings that you can just use on your search page, have fun with it. So you have facets, you have search boxes, you have search interfaces, you have everything. But you have more than that, actually. You have an example search page, which is already using all those components without you having to know where to put every single one of them. And that's really cool when you want to have a search page real quickly. So just open your create from template, go to branches, Covil Hive, and you have your example search page right here. That's gonna create not only a search page, but an entire branch with children. Those children are the data sources for the different renderings that you have on your search page. So right here, you have a lot of different search-related renderings with a different layout, and you have your search page there, created within a few minutes. If we open the experience editor, and I really hope that it won't take forever, cross the fingers. But yeah, if you open the experience editor, you should not only be able to see those components there forming the search page, but you should also be able to play with it real easily, because you can basically remove components from your search page. Because let's just say that in your case, you don't need sort options. You are going to be sorting by relevance, and that's it. Or you can create a second facet, a filter, because you have the default one, but in your case, you need a third one. So they just go there and do that. All those operations, which are usually done, no matter how your template is built, if it is using Sitecore Hive or not, you keep that strategy when using Sitecore as well. Doesn't matter if you're using your standalone search page components or not. So it's taking form, and there we go. Please don't take forever, Sitecore. You guys already use it to that, right? So I don't need to explain that. But yeah, that's a search page. So as you can see here, there are different set of renderings. A few ones of them are not visible on the search page itself. So if you publish everything, and we'll be doing that in a few minutes, that code view for Sitecore analytics right here, for instance, will just disappear. That's just something informative that is telling us that that search page has analytics. So remember that I mentioned that Covil will collect every single signal or event which is generated by users clicking and typing on the search page. If you want to do that on your search page, just drop that component, and that's it. You're done. You don't need to worry about anything. You don't need to worry about sending the right organization ID, because your Sitecore will take care of it. You don't need to worry about having the JavaScript to do that. Just relax and enjoy the moment. Again, different set of renderings. So that's the most important one. Covil search interface, the biggest one. Every single one of them will be inside of it, except by the search resources. Search resources is basically a component which is responsible for informing Covil Sitecore, which is the version of Covil JavaScript that you are using. And you can also use it so that in the future, if you don't want to use the latest, because by default, you don't even have a data source. It is there, and by having it there, you see that, yeah, you don't need to worry about sending the data source. You just need to drop the rendering, that's it. But let's just say that in the future, for a given reason, you need to roll back a few versions on your Covil Sitecore JavaScript UI framework. So you just drop a data source there, and you're going to have a field, which is the version. Just drop it, send the version, and you're done. Again, don't worry about it. Right? That's just too early for that. Search interface, you have a different set of cool things here. You can create within the search interface boost expressions. So you remember that on the cloud platform, on the pipeline, we had pretty much the same thing. So yeah, that's at the cloud level. So every single page passing by that pipeline will apply those expressions. Here it's at the search page level. So those expressions are going to be true for that page. The difference that someone who has access to Sitecore may change those. And that's for Covil administrators only. So it's up to you guys how you want to set up the configuration, but the option is there. Same thing for a query filter. You have different filters, and you have different filters at the search interface level and also at the tab level, because you have those two components which are tabs, and the difference between them is that you have different items when you click on each one of them. All content which is basically showing everything which is under home. So as you can see here, there is a row, everything which is under home and has a layout associated to it. So basically every single page that I have on my current setup. You guys should really take some time to play with it. So just go here. You can just go here and boom, remove it. You can go here and add the third one if you need to, or even I don't want to sort by date. Remove it. I don't like cards. Remove it. And there you go. Just play with it. I won't save it because I need those to show my thing in a few minutes. But that's a search interface, and it took what? A few minutes to be created, real quickly. Let's just go here, publish their entire website. And have fun with the search page. I mean, it was simple, right? Really simple. You just need to download the package, install the package, configure the package, rebuild your indexes. I spent some time going through the cloud platform, but in a real world, you don't need to worry about that. It is everything here. So you install, you configure here, you rebuild everything here, you go back here, you create a search page, and you are done. So let's just see if my search page is working. There we go. That's our search page up and running. It's basically showing what I have published, which is just my home page. And that's a result template, which is out of the box. On a real world, you guys will be spending some time here, right? Creating your own search result template with the information which is relevant for your client. But that's just an example of how you can handle it. I mean, tabs, you may have tabs or not. I don't have any media items right here. You can have different result templates or not, result layouts or not. And you can even have more than just two facets. It's up to you. You can even, and that's really important because all those components, they are there out of the box, but you can even create your own custom components by leveraging what is there. So let's just say that instead of just using the standard facet component, you need your own facet component. So instead of creating that from scratch, you can take this one, extend it, and apply what you want on your new component. And that's pretty much the method that I've been using during the last years when I needed to create some custom components. There are a lot of blog posts about it. I have one, for instance. So if you guys need to do that, just make sure that you use the Google and it should be good to go. That's pretty much that I had in mind to show to you guys. So going from 0 to 1 within CodeView, it wasn't that hard, right? I mean, I really hope so. But if you guys have questions, again, please make sure that you send me those questions. I'll be more than happy to answer them. You can find me on Sitecore chat, Slack, or on Twitter. Feel free to reach me out. If you just want to talk about some future project or anything like that, I'm here to help. It was a pleasure to be sharing those moments with you guys. Thank you very much, Bruce, again. I hope you enjoy the rest of the night with the other presentations. And see you again later. Thank you very much.
Well, wow. Yeah, I didn't know I did all that. Yeah, that's the sort of stuff that we'd agonize over trying to set up manually. So quite a good solution. I believe it's being implemented in New Zealand, which is really exciting. Yeah, Luke's nodding there. He knows what's going on.
Yep,
and
for inland revenue, no less.
Yeah, which is pretty exciting because they're a big organization with a lot of information, yeah? So that kind of relevancy suddenly becomes a whole lot more important, you know, rather than the old default search results. So yeah, if you Google tax, what are you going to get? Oh, tax, that's easy. But to follow on from that, which is a really good 101 on CodeView, I actually learned stuff as well. We've got Kiwi. Kiwi is working with, so we'd like to welcome Kamar. Are you there, mate?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Oh, yay! Victory! Victory!
Yeah, so let
So yeah, just take on over, mate, and rip on into it. I'm going to find this really interesting because it's all fine and well hearing about the theory of things and how it should work out of the box and stuff, but this man has done it. So yeah, go for it, buddy.
Can you see my screen, bros?
Yep, looking good.
Perfect. So let me begin. Cool. So welcoming one and all once again to the New Zealand Sitecore user group. Not sure how much this session would be, meaningful after the wonderful session or recording which we have just watched from the Kovio guru himself, Hugo. So Hugo, you rock, mate. The session was really good, and I'm sure anyone who watches this recording will definitely go from 0 to 1, no doubt in that. Coming to my topic for today. Thanks, Bruce, for this topic, Kovio for Kiwis, which you have given me. I'm not sure how it's related, but I've still kept it on my slide since it has come from you, a cool topic. But basically, in this session, what I will try to summarize is whatever learnings which came from me or from my team at AKQA Auckland while we were working on Kovio search provider with a large Sitecore implementation in New Zealand. A little bit about me. So I'm Kumar Saurabh, tech lead at AKQA. More or less 4+ years of experience while playing with Sitecore. And from last couple of months, juggling with Kovio and just seeing how Kovio is the best fit with our Sitecore implementation. And probably we are now in the development phase as well with Kovio. Coming to the agenda of this session, so I'll be covering in brief the concepts and architecture. So it would be probably more or less similar what was talked in the previous recording by Hugo. And then would talk about Kovio Sitecore development, probably some learnings as well. And then like means what are those essential things which a Sitecore developer or say any developer which should know in the Kovio cloud platform. Even though Kovio cloud platform, like there will be means business users or admins who would be doing their work there, but still there are a bunch of things which probably developers and QAs should know. We'll have a short demonstration, and then in the end we will see why we should consider Kovio as a search provider. Does it make sense to invest there? Cool. So the first part of my session, concepts and architecture. So let me just quickly summarize. I've just tried to picturize whatever are the various building blocks if we are using Kovio as a search provider. So just one word intro of Kovio, it deserves it. So actually Kovio is an intelligent, in double quotes, SaaS-based search platform. So like that is what is the what to say is. So if we actually differentiate Kovio from the other search platforms, this is the actually main differentiator. Now, if we see, starting from the first part. So how how would this journey start? So it starts from the actual end user who is doing the search from our search page, right? And then if we are using Kovio, so in our search page, what sits is Kovio search interface. Now, Kovio search interface should be of primary interest to developers because this is the place where developers' work will be happening, because this is a place where the search page is made, various search page components are created. And Kovio search interface is basically just a wrapper on top of JavaScript or say JS UI interface, whatever Kovio has written. So now what happens is from here is so yes means developer have built that search page, search interface is up and ready. Now whatever we see in this block, everything lies or resides in the Kovio cloud platform. Right. So if I see from the left, the first thing is a Kovio index. So obviously, before any search happens, so means data needs to be indexed. So actually, in Kovio, we can index data from Sitecore, obviously, as we are talking about Sitecore here. But there are n number of external sources. There are out-of-box connectors which we can enable by minimal configurations. So it can be SharePoint, database, or say external website, and so on and so forth. Just think of any external source, and they have the connector, available there. So means what happens is that your content from the actual source gets indexed to Kovio. And how is the structure in this Covio indexes that on each document level, or rather I would say on each item level, irrespective of from which source it's coming. So for each item, what sits in Covio is the actual content, corresponding user permission, and the metadata. So mind you, if I'm saying metadata, so like this is not the metadata which we are setting from our end, but this is the metadata which is managed by Covio, which means that they are keeping something called as metadata, which they are calling it internally. And that is actually summary of document type, last modified date, number of visits of that document, its rating, language, etc., etc. And actually Covio internally uses that metadata to improve the search relevancy. And that is on document level and item level. Cool. So like this is how now our data is available in the index. Now, from the search page, whatever interaction user does, maybe it's click or say means page visit, and so on and so forth. So all the interactions actually are pushed to the Covio analytics, which still resides in the Covio platform. And then we have Covio machine learning. So actually Covio machine learning models, so means either Covio administrator, business user, or even developers, they can go and create Covio machine learning models depending on the actual requirement. So it's just matter of, a couple of clicks, creating the model, configuring it, and what does model does. So obviously any machine learning model, we need to train them, right? How does that get trained? We have all data available here. So actually over a period of time, this model can be, so means actually it can learn or get trained based on the data which is already captured in Covio analytics. All good, all done. Now, so now data is available, means all this is pushed, models are done. So how do we push the actual relevant content to the, means back to the end user? So means there comes our query pipeline. So actually all these models, whatever we have created, needs to be attached to a particular query pipeline, which means any request which is made from the search page first goes to our query pipeline. To our query pipeline, then inside query pipeline, what we have are set of features which actually business users can add so that they can actually modify the actual query. So me being a user, if I have typed ABC, then it's not necessary I see the actual match for ABC, because depending on the actual user behavior, so any administrator can come here and actually modify that query based on some rules, etc., etc. And obviously all these models can be attached to there, and based on these models we can get various recommendation, auto suggestion, etc. So like this was the whole summary. If I just think of the entire Covio search architecture, and then if I try to tie it up, so actually means how this entire process works is, now say if user executes a search, if any appropriate models are configured, then Covio machine learning model will use this particular user browsing behavior, or probably even the browsing behavior of the similar user from the similar user segment, and give them back the most relevant search result rather than giving just the exact match. And that's what it matters. And so we call it as an intelligent SaaS-based search platform. Cool. So moving ahead. Now let us try to probably digest a bit about the indexing architecture. So how does means documents or say anything gets indexed to Covio? So here, if you see in the left side, I have mentioned Covio Search Provider. But before I go here, so if it's any Sitecore project, so obviously we have to also think through like how many indexes are required in Covio. So if it's so obviously if it's a multi-site implementation, then we might need to have multiple web indexes. So all those things need to be probably thought through in the beginning, like how many Covio indexes you need, rather than just means, because if you have a multi-site implementation, then you might need to have separate web indexes per site rather than just one simple web index, like we used to do in our means previous search provider. Then we can think of all our computed fields, what are the, and then means how many crawlers we need per site, and then which templates which actually we need to index, fields to index, excluding. So all those logic we can think of, and we can tie it up here via our inbound filter, pre and post processing pipeline. Good news And good news here is that this Covio search provider actually is nothing new, which means that means whatever we have written inbound filtering, or say if we are migrating from Azure to Covio, or say from Solar to Covio, then whatever computed fields and all, or say means whatever filters we have written before, those can be still reused just as is, and probably just tied in here. So means how this indexing process starts is, so obviously it starts from Sitecore, and then we have a Covio search provider. As soon a rebuild index or say index is triggered, first thing what happens, they call it as pre-indexing. And as part of pre-indexing, still data is not pushed. What is pushed is just a field synchronization from Sitecore to Covio. If that is all good, then we have our set of pipelines in terms of any inbound filter if those are defined, and if we have added any custom logic as part of our pre and post processing pipelines gets executed. And then from Covio search provider, we get the actual data which needs to be sent to index. That gets pushed to a push API, which actually sits in the Covio cloud platform. And now this data doesn't goes to the index as is. At the Covio cloud platform and as well, you have the same pre and post process extension, which means Covio does some mashing on your data, whatever data we are pushing to this Covio cloud platform, and then it sends to index, which means we have an extra opportunity here as well. If we want to customize anything, like means if we want to change any behavior of data before it's pushed to index, we have an opportunity here as well. The good use case which means we have seen till now, so actually this would be primarily used if we are indexing data from external source. And if it's a Sitecore, so one use case which I could think of, because obviously if we write computed fields, so it's so at times it can be so memory consuming, right? So means just imagine that you have a complicated logic for your computed field. And if you keep your computed field logic here, so obviously it will be using your Sitecore resource. And if your computed field does not need Sitecore context, then that logic can be pushed here, right? So that whatever resources it's using, it is of Covio cloud platform and nothing bothers you. So that was a bit of the indexing thing which is happening in Covio. Coming to the, now let's understand about the querying architecture. So actually means whenever there is a query which is pushed, so say if our end user is doing a search on a search page, which means now we understand, right? So search page means Covio search interface, if I'm speaking in the language of Covio. So as soon any query is made, then the first thing happens that the query is pushed to the REST endpoint proxy. This REST endpoint proxy sits in Sitecore. Still, there has been no call made to the Covio. So still a call has been made just to Sitecore under the hoods. And then this REST endpoint proxy actually based on all the request header, it does make a call to the Covio cloud platform where we have the search endpoint. Once Covio cloud platform endpoint receives this request, then it does a talk with the actual index, and it pulls only those data to which this user has permissions to see. Because if you remember that index means each document or item which contains actual content, metadata plus permissions if we have added. So say if permissions were associated, then so it will return back those document if if the user who has made this request has the permissions to view that document or the item. So yes, it's returned back. Then the search endpoint in the Covio cloud platform sends back to the REST endpoint proxy, which will be just a JSON, which means that now this JSON is here. So here also we have an opportunity to modify the JSON if it is required before pushing it back to the actual user. So say if we want to add anything or probably modify some logic in that JSON based on some custom need, we can do that here as well, and then push it back to the end user. So with this, I just tried to probably summarize the understanding of Covio and its working. Cool. Now Now with this understanding, let's move to the actual development, which we might need to do once we are working in a means Covio implementation in a Sitecore project. So I don't know why I'm going back. Yeah. So first thing will be like means what is required. So obviously, as Hujos has shown us that there is a package which Covio gives per Sitecore, right? So like means depending on the Sitecore version you are having. So like there will be a Covio package which we need to download and just install. Boom, done. Once that is done, what it does, so it actually installs a bunch of items in your Sitecore instance in master database, and then it also pushes set of artifacts files like DLLs, configs, JSON, XML inside your CMS because you have installed your package only in CMS till now, right? Once that is done, so means and after this installation, so it is all those default package file depending on your Sitecore version. It does not contain any connection to a particular organization and all, right? So as soon you activate this with your proper credential, then actually all the configs which sits in your CMS gets updated with the correct API keys. Because for all those REST calls, whatever happens either for indexing or for the search retrieval needs to happen via Sitecore, right? So as soon we are activating, so the corresponding config which sits in Sitecore gets updated with the correct license key, API key, and so on and so forth. So once that is done, we are ready to go, and we are ready to do our actual development. Just one word of caution here probably is means just thinking in terms of DevOps process, because here what we have done is so obviously if it's local there is no problem because we just have one CM and CD. But if we go to the non-prod and prod organization where we have a separate CM and CD, so we need to think of a strategy how we can push those out of box files plus the API keys. And mind you, these API keys will get changed if you're changing the organization. So this particular strategy needs to be thought, and this could be a project specific. So it could be solved by multiple ways, by keeping it in the repo, or say by handling via Octo. But yeah, this is one thing which needs to be thought through. Uh, why do it's coming? Yeah, sorry. So once the prerequisites are done, now means what we need to do is that we need to build our search interface, which needs to sit in our search page. So for building that search interface, if we are using Covio, then Covio has a very good, JavaScript search framework library, which is an open source, which can be used in any project. Maybe it's Sitecore application, maybe it's .NET application or single page application, where we can use those components, include in our page, and then it can, means talk to Covio Cloud and give us result. But if we are in Sitecore, we don't even need to do that, because they have actually created individual MVC view rendering one-to-one mapping with those components which are available in this JavaScript search framework, which we can add to our page. So like so means they have made it further easy once we are talking Covio for Sitecore. And since this is available, so it supports rapid search page development in Sitecore. Let us quickly see. I'll just leave here a few seconds. So if you see here, means list of components which Covio Hive gives, and even though it's not a complete list, I just try to include as much could fit in one slide. But if you see it here, just think of any search component which you have made in last 4 years, 5 years, or say in your development experience. Each and everything, whatever you would have made is available here. So like they have thought through. So any search element or component required in a modern day search page, they have covered each and everything. But if something is not there, there is no worries. So we can still go and create those custom component. Now, a little bit on this search page structure. Once we are building the search page, so as Hujos was showing in the video, so actually once you install the package, they give you a branch template based on which you can just do a one-click, create your search page, done. But actually, once you are building your actual search page, so means that might not be the case. So actually, you would be already having your own template, and probably you would be, means pulling components depending on what is required. So if I think of how that search page would look like, now say any search page, any project, so it will have some placeholder for header, some placeholder for footer, and somewhere, and then it would have one placeholder for the actual body, or say the main section, right? So I've been talking of Covio search interface multiple times before. So the first component which needs to sit is the Covio search interface. And that is, probably the means the entry point component which needs to be in your search page. And as soon you add Covio search interface to your main placeholder probably, or the body placeholder, then it gives you bunch of other placeholders where you can add your frame component. Again, this frame component is coming from Covio. They give you multiple options where you have 3 column, 2 column, 1 column, and depending on your need, you can use that, configure that. And inside your frame column, you need to add Covio for Sitecore analytics. So actually this component is required so that all the user interactions are pushed to the Covio analytics, right? And then depending on your need, you can add the query summary, Covio breadcrumb, sort, result template, pager, and so on and so forth. Just wanted to say about this Covio search resources. So again, this is a mandatory component. So Covio search resources contains just a set of CSS and JS files. So either you can add it in your page, or it can be added in your layout file somewhere in the bottom, just before your body tag is closed, so that it's not blocking, means your DOM paint. And since I have been saying that Covio search interface is the primary thing, so now there might be a scenario that you want to have your global search box as part of your header. Now, this cannot come in your main. So how do we handle that? So Covio has given a solution for that as well. So if there is any individual component which needs to be, out of Covio search interface, so for that, they have developed a component called as external component section rendering. So that needs to be added. And as soon you add this rendering, it gives you a data source by which you can attach this section to a particular search interface. So even though it's actually outside, but you can, probably connect it to a particular search interface. And then in this, you can add your global search box. Cool. Moving to, yeah. So now this is another important topic. So now we have seen that there are so many of renderings which Covio gives, but do we really need to customize anything? And if we need to customize, up to what extent we should customize, right? So if I just think through, so once developer get a component from our designers to make, then probably they should always do a quick look of all the Hive renderings which are available, and probably see if those components are available. If those components are available, they can do a quick check if that just needs a style change, because quite obvious we'll need a style change. And if it's a style change, then we can check whether that style means HTML structure change. If HTML structure change, then Covio suggest us just go and duplicate that particular rendering, whatever they have given, and just make that duplicated rendering as your feature project and just change that HTML rather than changing in that same, because you'd not want to do that, right? Cool. Now say that, okay, HTML structure change is not required. What is required is just a changing probably height, width, or background color, which means just CSS. Then we can just use some custom CSS classes given by our front-end devs, and we can use that. So like this is the customization required. Now, no, and then once we are checking here, then we see no, it is more than style change required. Then what do we do? Then if it is more than style change required, so whatever component Covio gives, they gives a corresponding data source. So in that data source, they have built bunch of variations. So actually they have thought through what kind of customization might be required for any modern day search page component. And they have given us all those, means data source variation. So probably at this point, devs can take a call that can I vary my component just by changing that data source? If yes, then they would just configure that data source and add those custom CSS classes, done. But if they have not built that, what do we do next? Then probably devs can go and just Google that open source code, because this Hive rendering is just a wrapper of the components which they have in their open source project of Covio JavaScript. So actually, I think just 50% of those functions or methods which is exposed in the component. So means they have created the corresponding data source variation, but there are a bunch of others for which what Covio has given in the component, that they have given us a key value pair wherein we can add the additional data attributes like show something, hide something. So if there is anything which is exposed here, we can just use the key value pair, which I'll be quickly showing you in our demo, and then we can add it here and we are done. So still no chance to make any component, but there could be some like probably in my experience I have seen just 2 component out of 30 components which we are building where nothing fitted, and then we need to create a custom component. But if we need to create custom component, how do we build that? So like backend will be just a rendering, and front end we can have a TypeScript component which would just wrap the Covio.js. So this is all about when should we customize. Seeing the time, I'll just rush through here. In the Covio Cloud Platform. So in the Covio Cloud Platform, bunch of things which are important for devs to know are the sources, wherein they can add external source, pipelines, machine learning model, and analytics. I will just take 1 minute in the end to probably scan through this by logging in the Cloud Platform. Moving to the demo, I was supposed to show config files, search page structure, search query, how it goes in the Cloud Platform. I'll just take 5 more minutes, bros, and see if I am able to wrap it up. So
yeah, no worries, mate. Just take your time. I think everyone's here for the duration. It's really interesting. Carry on, please.
Yeah. So I just wanted to show about the configurations. So as soon we install Covio, Sitecore connected package in our CMS, so it installs or probably it adds bunch of config files in our CMS, as I was mentioning in beginning, right? So if we see here inside our app config modules, so all the default configuration which Covio needs sits under modules Covio, which for sure no one of us will change, because we know that if we need to change anything, we create batch files. But just for the information, so all the configs sits here, and the important config here is covio.searchprovider.config, which if we see, it has opened in my other screen, which we see contains all those default files. And it is nothing different from the other search providers which we have been working, like Solar or Azure. It's more or less same, right? And as soon we activate our cloud platform based on our organization license and all, so like there are a bunch of configs which gets updated here with the API keys. Plus if we see app config include, they have a config Covio file. So here this is the important file which gets updated as soon we, I would just like to quickly show this as well. So anyways, these API keys are of my trial dev thing. So as soon we activate that, so it actually adds means corresponding API key, organization key, search API key, and probably this is used whenever a call is made to the cloud platform, which I was showing, right? Whenever a search query is made, how it goes from the actual REST to the cloud platform. So all those details sits here, nothing to change. But yes, this detail needs to be propagated to CD. So that we have to think through, like how best we can push to CD, depending on project to project. And this is the custom.config. So actually, this custom.config is one place where we can update all our custom indexes, custom fields, computed fields, or if we want, we can have a patch config. But yeah, but this is the place as well where we can do. And yeah, this will not be overwritten means as our Covio is upgraded. So if I see here, so here it contains placeholders where we can add our computed index field, or if we want to add a new index, if we want to add crawlers. So obviously you would not want to add all crawlers, right? Means rather than crawling that entire thing, you would rather want to crawl in certain section of your site. So all those details you can add here. Cool. And like any custom thing, like say if you want to change the indexing scope or external field or computer index field, which you can have as your patch file as well. And this is exactly same how we used to do with our previous search providers. So no point opening these configs. So that was all about config. Next, I would go to Sitecore. So this is the Sitecore instance. I hope it's still alive. Cool. So, and since I have installed, and this is Sitecore 9.3 installed with the Covio connector, which is meant for 9.3. And already Hughes has shown us like how this Covio search platform from this dashboard looks. I'm not going into that. Quickly, just showing you the search page, which I was showing in my slide. And so like this is the search page, which has been not created via branch template. So probably just added details, just doing a quick walkthrough. So if you see this page structure, so it's like means any other typical page template of search page where we might have header, body, and then footer, right? So if you see in the bottom, if you can still see it, so I have added Covio search resources in my layout file just before my /body, so that it's loading in the end. And that's what was important. Second important thing was to add Covio search interface, which I have added in the means primary placeholder, which was part of this application. So means nothing Covio here. As soon we added Covio search interface, that's all. So with this Covio search interface, if you see it, like if I just quickly show you the data source of that, which we can come from here, which we can see from here as well. So here is a place which you just was showing us how we can add boost expression rule. What I wanted to show was, yeah, so actually query pipeline. So so means whatever search interface we do, if you still recall the first slide where I was showing that entire picture of Covio, so actually search interface talks to query pipeline, right? So that the actual result gets back to the end user. So if it is kept empty, then it pulls data from the default query pipeline which comes with any organization. But there might be a scenario where you might be having multiple query pipelines, say if it's a multi-site Sitecore implementation, or say you have a Sitecore implementation where you have internal users and public users, then you'd want to define different set of rules for them. So yeah, there could be a valid scenario of having multiple query pipeline. And if that is the case, so this is the place where we change quite obvious other settings. Yeah. Now here, if you see, so actually this is the place where we can add additional sources. So say if you have the sources which is outside Sitecore, right? So means it can be our SharePoint site or an external website. So actually for this application, I have also means crawled Auckland Sitecore user group meter, Auckland Sitecore user group meetup site. And that is why, and this is the name I have given in Covio while I have crawled that. So like this is the place, and here we can add a number of sources just by enter. So whatever sources we have. And in normal license, I think Covio has a restriction of 25 sources per organization, if memory serves. Yeah. So we can add a number of sources here. This is the place where you can give a custom class. This is the another important setting regarding initialization. So initialization is something which happens as soon your search interface is initialized. So and this is another important thing which we might need to change if we are doing actual Sitecore implementation, because by default Sitecore, or say Covio search interface, assumes that we have Covio master index and Covio web index, which might not be the case, right? We might be having our site specific web indexes. So like this is the place where we need to duplicate this initialization file and give it a name of our site specific initialization file and call it from here. And these were the additional data attributes, which I was saying that if data source is not having those variation, but the actual JS UI, what they have built in JavaScript, if that is exposing a field or say a method, that could be added here. So we can have a number of additional data attributes. Wrapping up, nothing special here. Now quickly showing the query, and why is this disturbing me? So yeah, so this is the search page, And if you see, so since I have scanned the entire meetup, so you see the number of items it has scanned. So I can actually filter that by different thing, like okay, like means only scan so and so, like don't scan images. Currently it has scanned everything. So I just wanted to show probably how the call goes, and say if I add Bruce as well here. So if we see, just take a call of, so first thing was query suggest, which was there. And then there were two calls, right? So if you see the first call, so as I was saying, that each and every interaction from the search page or search interface goes to the CoView analytics. And this is what happens in this call. So all the user behavior and everything goes from here to analytics. So like there's a REST API call made at Sitecore, and then the call is made internally, which pushes data to the CoView Cloud platform. This is the actual data which brings result, like this call if you see. So again, this is the, so what we are seeing here is the API which is at the Sitecore end, which gives us that JSON which I was mentioning there. But what it does is, so, but internally this will make a call to the CoView Cloud and gets data back to us. So if we see a couple of important things here, might be handy if we are debugging stuffs. Yeah, inside form data. So to which particular CoView interface it is coming, then how many sources. So like this is my actual query, and then it is pulling data from which all sources, which are templates are excluded, blah, blah. So all those things can be seen in this, and they call it as advanced query and constant query. So nothing, yeah. And one learning probably which I had regarding this. So if you see this query suggest, now if I type Auckland, then looks like that model which I have created has learned and it has given me Auckland Sitecore user group. But what problem we noticed, so our auto suggestion was not working. And then to me, like once we have done all settings, everything was fine, but it was still not working. And only after spending couple of hours, what we noticed, which probably I missed while debugging, was that I was having URL rewrite, which actually changed all caps to lower. And then if you see, it will give us a 404. So it would be an important thing that if we have a URL rewrite module which is changing caps to low, so we should exclude this. So this query suggest will only work if it's a capital S, and same goes for the other calls. So good thing to watch. Probably that's all from Sitecore. And quickly, if I could show you a quick glimpse of admin console, hoping I'm not logged out. Yeah, so these are the organizations which I have. So so like this is a demo organization which I have created for this particular website. And so these are my CoView indexes, and this is the place where I tried to scan this Auckland Sitecore user group meetup. And we have hundreds of, not hundreds, but at least bunch of external sources which could be used. And just one thing to mention here, so like there might be a scenario where your source would be on premise. So even that would be a good discussion point whenever we if we need to crawl any on-premise source, because in that case, CoView crawler module needs to be installed in that particular network. And there is a separate set of documentation which needs to be followed to install that crawler module in Docker inside that network. But that was one thing which I just wanted to mention here. Not going in detail considering time, we are already. And then quickly showing about the models. So already I have created a model which gives me query suggestion. And since you were saying that I was getting query suggestion for Auckland Sitecore user group, so it's based on that. And we can have a number of models created. So model could be for product recommendation, relevance tooling, query suggestion, and so on and so forth. Any model which is created here, so it can be tested directly first before we are associating it to a particular pipeline. So if I want to test, say, my query suggestion, I could see if it is giving data to me or not. So now I see that, yes, it is giving me, and then probably I can associate it to my query pipeline. How do we associate? So in the query pipeline, this is our query pipeline. So in the query pipeline, we can associate the model. So already I have associated this model, but if we have a bunch of models, we can add them as well. And while associating a model to a query pipeline, we can also mention certain filters. It's a huge topic. And these are the bunch of steps which we can, probably modify the query as Hujos was showing us. So we can have this set of features or change the query pipeline. And last thing is analytics. So even this is a good place for actually even the business users to come and see how the actual search behavior is happening. So if I come and see here for this particular website, and say if I change it to, I don't know, when did I, last weekend I did. So I could see here like which were the top user queries and blah, and like whatever we have been doing, right? So everything is seen here. And then actually based on this data, this could be analyzed, and based on this, different rules could be associated, or say different query pipelines could be added, and different models could be created. So all those could be done. And probably that's all here, I would say, which I could show in this time. And just going back, like means after seeing all this, should we really go for Covio? So I would say if it is a normal search page, which does not need automatic relevance tuning, does not need ranking and boosting defined by the administrators without doing a single line of code change, which does not need query suggestion, or so even query suggestion could be done with the other search provider, but here it was quite easy. It was quite flexible, which could be, just changed just by a few clicks from the Covio admin. And then it captures a good usage analytics, right? So like these are the things which is mainly from business point of view. But if I think from development point of view, based on whatever limited experience I have with Covio, I would say like building a search page when you are using Covio Hive, so it would be definitely 2 or 3 times means faster if we are building with say Azure Search. Just imagine if we have to build a search page which reads data from multiple sources using any other search provider A or B versus Covio. Cool. And in Australia and New Zealand, if you're having any specific license related queries for Covio, so Hyper Insights are their license partner for AUNZ. And so just a point of contact email of Alex who deals with these things. Cool. That's all, bros. Questions? Happy to take.
Wow, I'm wow, mate. So, I mean, like Hugo's presentation was really good, and I got some buzz out of that. But you've taken it to the next level stuff. It raises a whole lot of really interesting questions, stuff I've been dealing with New Zealand clients at the moment, around the idea of user journeys and getting access to information. Things like this really are incredible because they take how your users are attempting to interact with you and give you the ability to deliver really, really relevant results. A good example, for example, is the help desk thing where, most organizations have help desk, which is taking calls, right? And if you go and talk to the help desk people, you find out like 90% of the calls are, can I, should I, will I, if this happens, and those are the sort of things which an organization needs to expose up front, and this looks like a really excellent way of doing it. Having worked with Sitecore search in a variety of ways, it's in no way compares to this. I love how you index the Sitecore user group. That deserves a round of applause, buddy, especially since it generated like 42 gigabytes of data on your account. Delete that stuff.
Yeah.
That is
cool.
That was so impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome, Saurabh.
Thanks, Leok.
Really cool.
Anyone else have any questions? Feel free to pipe in. I think you should be able to unmute yourselves. Deathly quiet out there. Just us Kiwis still up chatting at 9:47. Look, thank you so much again, Kumar. That was legend and going last as well, especially after Hugo. But I think it worked really well, right? We built on the topic really successfully.
Yeah. I hope we have gone from 1 to probably 1.5.
I think at least a 2, mate. I can just see so many applications for it. You know, it's especially I remember IRD was talking about the need to index external data sources, and I'd imagine that's what you've done, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, relevant point, Bruce, as well as I think it might have been Gopi that noticed that Sitecore are pulling Azure Search from a future release. They're saying it's not going to be supported going forward. That popped up in one of the documentation, one of the pre-release bits, I think.
Yeah, well, it kind of sucked, really. Not to put too fine a point on it.
It's been really hard work.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh well, thank goodness you got Covio. That'll be fun. And look, if you need any help, just reach out to Hugo. He's been with the product for years, so should be able to help with anything that you know, if you get a roadblock.
Sure. It would be nice to chat if you're blocked at any point of time.
Hey, oh, of course, Kumar would be your first port of call, for heaven's sake. But if it's really gnarly, if it's like really gnarly, just we reach out. Thank you everybody for attending. Fabulous user group, 33 participants. Don't forget, if you'd like a t-shirt or a cap or one of those little privacy things which will you know, kind of hide your webcam when you don't want the government to be spying on you because you're a protester in Portland or whatever, I don't know. Just drop your email, your physical address into the chat and we'll send one off to you. Anyone else want to speak up? Otherwise, we're out of here. Oh, God, look, I haven't turned the camera on. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, everybody. Fabulous stuff.
Yeah, that was quite informative.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Great content.
Thank you, Vinod.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Happy dreams. Sleep well. Or wake up well. I don't know, depending on your time zone. It's confusing. I can never get the hang of it.
Yeah.
Oh, good work, Sebastian. Legend. Hey, mate, haven't you got some work to do or something?
Oh, yeah.
Go and put some sites.
I'm doing. I had to drop one at one point to go and join some daily calls.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Good night.
Good night. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, bye.